Everyone has a bright light inside of them that deserves to be seen by the world. That's why it's time to shine the light on the extraordinary who are accomplishing phenomenal things. This is the Shine Out Loud Show with Lillian Ogbogo.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are, and welcome to another episode of Shine Out Loud Show with me, Lillian Ogbogo. I have a phenomenal guest tonight, and actually, if you are watching us live on Twitter, yes, we are on Twitter. We are doing a Periscope Live, and we are in the studio of a phenomenal woman who is a textile artist. This woman is so amazing. I'm going to struggle to find words. So join me and welcome my incredible guest, Enam, and I pray I do this justice, Gbewonyo.
You did it very well. Thank you.
Thank you. I am so glad to get you on the show. Now, we're going to talk about you. We're going to talk about your incredible artwork, and then we're going to talk about the collective you started.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, now for people who can see you, you look really young. So I'm going to go, by the time I go into your history, I don't want to ask you on air how old you are, because you're going to say something, and I'll be looking at you from the side of my eye. But you've been working in your field for a long time.
I have, yes.
Yeah, you don't look old enough. So I'm going to get that out the way. You do not look old enough.
Thank you. I am definitely blessed with very good genes, thanks to my mum and my dad. Yes, we won't go into age, but basically 40 is not that far off.
We don't need to know all of that. I mean, we're friends here, but we don't need to go all the way into that. But truly, we're really honored to be here. Actually, in your space. This is your studio.
You, yes.
So it's great, because when I look at your work and I look at what you do, and I was actually quite tired, just kind of trying to cover everything you do. You were just phenomenal.
So, thank you.
So let's start with this.
Yeah.
You define yourself as a multimedia textile artist. What's that?
So basically my background is actually in textile design. That's what I studied at university. So that was actually creating fabric. So I did knit textiles, I did weaving, I did print and embroidery. And I specialised in knit and print specifically, but I also enjoy embroidery. So when I started my art practice, I wanted to incorporate that into my work, because I found that it gave me so much freedom in terms of the way I can create and manipulate works. And so I incorporate that, but I also do painting. So I kind of create surface pattern painting. So there's some texture to my painting as well, which you'll see, the guys on Twitter will see as we pan around a little bit later.
What made you get into art? What made you start?
So I've always been an artist, really. I mean, I loved drawing from a very young age, and I just kind of followed it through in school. Art was one of those subjects that I kind of gave my all to. I'd be up till 2-3 in the morning, and this is at school doing my artwork. And I just thought, this is what I want to do. I just loved it, and I just wanted to continue studying it. So I did a general art and design course at college. And that was great, because that opened me up to different forms of art. So we did graphic design, we did fine art, and that's where I kind of got into textiles, and then decided that I wanted to continue that at university. It was a bit of a struggle, because, I am a young African lady, and my parents wanted me to do something, substantial, like accounting, law.
Doctor. How are you going to eat?
Exactly.
This art business.
Which is exactly what my mom said. She's like, how are you going to make money? Being an artist, you want to be a painter, how will you make money? But I was lucky in that I was the last born in my family, so I was quite stubborn, and I basically got my way. And, not to say that there weren't a few fights along the way, but, eventually my parents kind of caved in, and throughout uni were very supportive, and then obviously seeing my final year show kind of really understood what it was that I did, and really kind of, began to be champions for me. So, and have been ever since, really.
I can imagine at your final show, hey, that's my daughter. They'll call their friends on WhatsApp. Did you see my daughter's artwork? Can your daughter draw?
So so funny that you said on WhatsApp. WhatsApp wasn't even invented then. So.
But you know, if there was WhatsApp around, you see my daughter's artwork. Can you draw?
It's like, and the funny thing is that both my parents are really good at drawing. I mean, my dad was a quantity surveyor, so, you know, he had to use, you know, drawing within his work. And my mum had, you know, did say that when she was younger, she used to love drawing, but, you know, obviously they went into more, you know...
substantial work. Okay, so that's basically what we'll call it, substantial.
Substantial.
But your work is actually more than substantial because it took you to the state where you worked as a textile designer?
Knitted textile designer. So basically, when I finished uni, I really wanted to just continue my work within textiles, and I just had this idea that I wanted to live in New York. And I was lucky enough that at my university they had some links with a fashion design company in the US in New York. So I started there as an intern. Didn't really do much by the way of design, but you know, it was a way to get out there and just get familiar with the industry. Obviously, I was straight out from uni, so I was very green. And I realised that, you know, this is where I wanted to stay, because I had been applying for work here in the UK and not getting anywhere because they want people with 5 years experience, and obviously as a graduate, where are you going to get that from? And they were a lot more receptive in the States.
Okay.
So after the internship, I was just kind of basically getting out there, going to trade shows and looking at design houses, seeing which ones I might, you know, fit with, and just started sending applications. And fate, luck, whatever it was on my side, and a company got back to me, and that's basically how my career in fashion design kind of got started. And I started as an assistant designer and then worked my way up, and by the time I left, I was working as a full-fledged designer, so doing both knit and woven designs. So, yeah.
When you look at your work, when you say, with everything that you do, what will you say drives your creativity?
I think it's a difficult one for any creative. I mean, most of my work, I would say, I'm very much inspired by the natural world, and I feel like there's just such a freedom that we have lost as human beings. We've become so bogged down with technology and with rules, and there's just a way of life in the natural world where things just are as they are. And so if a bird wants to fly, it spreads its wings and fly. With us, we have to, you know, there's a whole process before we actually make any or do any actions. So so a lot of my work is looking at that and reflecting back the kind of freedom of the natural world, and kind of making comment on the things that we are now stifled by. But I've also, in kind of more recent years, started looking at things that really interest me conceptually. So, and it's more about, you know, issues that I'm affected by. So identity as a diasporan child. Am I Ghanaian? Am I English? Am I in the middle? Where do I exist? Because here I'm not seen as British, and in Ghana I'm not seen as Ghanaian. And so I've been looking at those kinds of issues, and just issues as a black woman. What are the things that, you know, are important to me, and how do I want to communicate that? And, you know, hopefully it's something that others will identify with, because the work I create is, you know, for everyone, but more so for my community.
You know, and that's actually quite great that you bring up identity and community and self, because one of the things when I look at your work, and and we're going to come into the other aspect of your work as a curator and as a founder, because you're also the founder of the Black British Female Artist Collective, which sounds like a mouthful, but it's not. It sounds like something that's really, really passionate, that you're really passionate about, and really great to do. So when we think about your art and your identity, and is art, culture, identity all linked, or can you separate the artist from the identity?
It's quite funny, artists get that question quite a lot, and I don't think you can separate the two. They go hand in hand, because the art that you create is about you, it's reflecting you, and it's what, you know, you're passionate about. So of course your identity is part of that. I think what's important, though, is that when our work is contextualised, that isn't the only story, because more often than not, it's just about identity. When you go to the Tate, or you go to the British Museum and you see a work by Hockney or Picasso, their identity doesn't come into it. It's more about the concept, the colour theory. But then when you see work by people of colour, more often than not, it's their identity that's contextualized more so than the actual kind of conceptual format of the work. So as much as an artist, of course, it is part of your work, I feel it's important for us to make sure that when our work is contextualized, that that's not the only story.
I like the fact that you bring it back to the fact that certain artists, that they see their work before they see their color. And when it's people of color, it seems to be a case of, well, our color first before the work.
Yeah.
So when you look at that, what do you think is the driving force behind that?
I think it is just a case of, the art world, for the most part, is kind of, the structure is created by the Western world. And so when our work is contextualized, it's put into a certain box to make it understandable. But I don't feel like that is necessary, and I feel like it's important for us to now take control and take ownership of our own work and of our own voice in order for those stories and the way that our work is reflected to change. And so you will see that there are artists.
Hi guys, oh my god, we just had the most major level interruption to the show. If you were just joining us and wonder where we went, we apologize. Technology, as Enam was saying, can sometimes get in the way of process of creating. We got disconnected, and to those on Twitter, we are finally live. So thank you for joining the Shine Out Loud show. We are here with Enam Gbewonyo, and I'm very cautious about mispronouncing names, because for me it's a big thing, because to actually pronounce someone's name with reverence is very, very important. Now, I'm talking to a multi-textile design artist. This is a woman who is not just a designer, a creator, an artist. She's also a founder. She's a founder of the Black British Female Artist Collection, or the Female Artist Collective. And you do all of that, and you create amazing pieces. And we're just talking about your background into art and what drives that. And also we were just talking about the link between identity, culture, and your art. Yeah. And you were just trying to explain that for us.
Yeah, so I was just saying that the majority of my work kind of looks at nature and tries to reflect the freedom that the natural world has, and how, as humankind, we've kind of lost that. And with the kind of age of technology, we've become so dependent on that, and kind of losing track of the things that are important, which is kind of energy and that kind of natural freedom that we have as animals, which we are for the most part. And then looking at the work I've been doing more recently, which is looking at my identity, looking at issues that I face as a woman, as a black woman, and trying to communicate that through my work. And I was just saying how important it is that, obviously my work is for everyone, but it's more so for our community, because it's important for us to be able to see ourselves reflected in art as well.
Okay, and, this is actually very important, because you're talking about community, you're talking about, creating work that is consumed by all. And I think that's also one of the things, because when we talk about art, there's this idea that, Banksy's owning such great artwork does not belong to us. We do not partake in it. We do not share in. We seem to have. It's almost right now a self-exclusion from it, because it's like, I'm busy. I have work to do. I have, as we said, substantial work to do.
Exactly.
Is it a case that we are excluding ourselves from the art realm in terms of owning, consuming, sharing, even celebrating art? Or is it a case of still there's this kind of lack of diversity in the art world?
I think it's, for the most part, that there's the lack of diversity, and I think this is something that we are starting to address, but it has had that knock-on effect that for the black community, or for people of colour, we feel that art is not for us because it's very exclusive.
Yes.
You go to any of the major museums and it's rare that you'll see work by people of colour that you can identify with. The most times when you see classics and there is a person of colour, they're in a role of servitude. And even the people that work in the museum, the people of colour that you see are usually working in the shop or working as a security guard. Where are the curators, the dealers, you know, in the professional art world that look like us? Because when that is addressed, that will also have a knock-on effect on the work that's being shown, and that having more reflection and more diversity, and therefore having the community then feeling that sense of, okay, there is some inclusion for us, there is, you know, we are part of this world. And I think that's been going on for centuries. I mean, even the way that African art is contextualized, and the words that are used to describe it, like tribal, make it seem lesser. But yet these are African art antiquities. When you go to Frieze and you see them being sold for ridiculous amounts of money, but we're told that our work is tribal, you know, and all of these kind of the language around that kind of starts to create certain mindsets. And then, you know, you have this knock-on effect where, you know, your parents are telling you that you shouldn't become an artist because you're not going to make money, because, you know, they don't see it as something that's valuable.
Yes.
So I think those are the things that we need to change. And it starts from the school, from young people going to school and seeing work in the art books that are made by people of colour, and those works look like them, and they're not in those roles of servitude, or, you know, the women aren't being depicted in a certain way. They're actually beautiful just as they are. You see works by amazing artists like Sonia Boyce, and they are just making work about us in everyday life.
Right.
And so you see that and you're like, oh, well, that's me, you know. I went to a show at Tyburn Gallery, an artist called Kudzene Violet Hwami, and she had done this beautiful collection of works kind of based on her family portraits. And they were absolutely stunning. And I was with my friends and we were saying, oh, that's like our, you know, our pictures from home of us, you know, on the sofa. And it really, it's the smallest thing, but it makes such a difference just to see yourself reflected in everyday life, which is what, you know, we've seen in the classics for years and years and years. And we're only now starting to see that, you know, for ourselves, you know, in that there are works of art out there in these gallery spaces in central London where you can go and see yourself reflected in the most positive light, and that's really important.
No, that's not important. That's actually vital.
It's vital.
It's vital to our self-identity, and it's actually vital to quite a few things. But before I go back to that, I want to actually say, because you spoke about curation and spoke about, you know, being in the business of art. You actually have curated a few shows, haven't you, now? And this is internationally. What is the one thing that artists of color need to do to get into those doors?
I think that's a difficult one, because I think it's different for every artist, because it depends on the kind of work you make and where you want your work to be seen. Every artist has a different goal. Some artists just want to make work, community work, or they just want to do installation. There are artists that want to be more commercial. There are artists that want that conceptual work, and they want the commissions, and they want to be in, you know, the big biennales and the big fairs. So it definitely varies, and it depends on, you know, each artist's personal goal. But I think what's important, like I said before, is that on the professional side there's more diversity, because that's where these are the people that go searching for the artists. These are the people that will find an artist and say, okay, I want to work with you, and I want to put you in this show, or I want to put you forward, and they start growing these relationships. And the more artists that are out there, then I think that starts to buck the trend, because it's all about trend, basically. And when, like at the moment, there's a real interest in African art, and so African art is everywhere, and that's why art fairs like 154 are doing so well now, because it is like the big trend.
What is Art Fair 154? So
154 started, I think this was its 5th year, and it runs every October, the first week alongside Frieze. And it's amazing. So it's 154 African Art Fair. So the idea is one continent, 54 countries, as in Africa as the continent. And so this is the one fair that we have dedicated to African and diaspora art in the UK, and they also run in New York, and for the first time ever in March they will start in Morocco as well, so that'll be the first one on the African continent. And it's basically, as it says, it's trying to create a platform for African art in the UK. And you have artists and galleries showing work by artists from all over Africa, and artists that work in the diaspora as well.
I didn't hear about it, haven't heard about it. It's been running for 5 years.
Yes.
So again, this is the whole conversation that it's not widely known. So what can we do to start putting that information out? How can we share the information in greater details? How can people find out more about this? Where do we need to plug into?
Yeah.
And I think the first place I will say people need to plug into is your art collective.
Yes.
So tell me about your art collective.
So I founded the Black British Female Artists Collective in 2015, late 2015, and it kind of stemmed from a lot of conversations I was having with other artists who were feeling the same frustrations as I was, that there weren't that many platforms for us to show our work, let alone sell. And just to have those audiences that actually understand our work and have that kind of real relationship with our work. And so I just thought, I need to do something about this. You know, we're always complaining about stuff, but, you know, unless someone tries to address the problem, how do we make a change? So the idea behind the collective was to get women artists together. And it was specifically women artists because I feel Black women have it much harder. It's a known fact. Black women have it much harder, and in the art world, it's no different. I mean, I say all the time, you know, you ask the majority of people to name a Black British male artist, and they can name at least one, even if it's Chris Ofili, Yinka Shonibare, they can name at least one. But how many can name women? I certainly couldn't when I started this collective. And that is a really sad state of affairs, because it was only in researching the collective that I began to learn of this huge arts collective in the 80s called the Black Arts Group, which included women, which included amazing artists like Lubena Himid, who's now been nominated for the Turner Prize.
Wow.
Artists like Sonia Boyce, you know, artists like Claudette Thompson. And it's frustrating that it took me doing my own research to find this out. And I have gone through arts education from secondary school through university. And in university, my one of my teachers actually introduced me to Yinka Shonibare, and that was the first kind of Black artist that I, you know, ever came to know of. And so this is why I say that it kind of starts with education, because how many artists have that same story? How many artists, be you self-taught or have gone through arts education, have you had to go and search yourself to find these artists that look like you and are creating amazing work that talks to you because you identify with that story because they're telling your story? I mean, it's also the fact that for Lubena Himid to put, you know, she also created a collective of artists of women of colour, and they did this show, The Thin Black Line, which was then brought back in, I think it was 2012 at Tate. And 2012, I had moved back to the UK and I was starting to work in the arts, and I didn't hear about this exhibition at all.
Wow.
And so again, it's like you say, there is a real kind of lack of promotion as well around diasporan art specifically. I said earlier that there is a huge kind of trend now for African art, which is fantastic because it's giving artists from Africa the platform that they desperately need. But in the same vein, it's now creating a space where diasporan artists don't really have a voice because we're not kind of creating that kind of work.
Yeah.
You know, there is this thing that, especially in the UK, that Black art is African art, basically, and African art has a certain look. Again, in the quote marks, tribal. And so for us, yes, you know, I'm Ghanaian, but I was also born in the UK. I've also gone through arts education here. My work doesn't necessarily reflect that. I mean, you can see some of my work here. You can't look at this painting of Stargazer Lily and say that that's African.
Guys, I'm just going to move, for all of you who's listening live, I'm just going to move our Twitter camera because we have Twitter feed, and I'm going to pan to some of the artwork because they are absolutely gorgeous. So this, what are we looking at here, right here in the middle?
So that one is part of the Flora Lily series. So all three of those are part of the Flora Lily series. And as I said, I'm very inspired by the natural world, and specifically flowers. I think they're so beautiful. And when you kind of hone in closely to just the petals and the veins, and, you know, looking into just everything in nature has synergy. And so you'll see like the veins and the petals, and you realize that it's just like the veins in and the blood vessels in our body when you know, look at it under a microscope. And again, it's like I was saying, it's finding those similarities between man and nature.
You know what, your work is really amazing. And,
thank you.
And I don't think anyone will look at your work and necessarily say it's tribal work.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, you keep saying that every time you say the word tribal art, I try not to giggle because I remember reading at one point that I call it the House of Stolen Stuff, aka the British Museum. What? They stole stuff. The House of Stolen Stuff tried to label the Benin bronze head, and at first it was then marked as it couldn't possibly be African work, and they tried to find ways of appropriating it and claiming it was created by somebody else. And as somebody, I was born here but had the good fortune of being educated in Nigeria as well. I remember the tribe called the Nupe people, which is part of Nigeria, and they were the ones that, you know, the Nupe people, the Benin bronze head, and the artwork they created in bronze at a time when they assumed that Africa did not understand what bronze was, let alone to be able to construct it out of art. So every time you say the word tribal art, I instantly have flashes to the bronze heads. And it's like, yeah, but if it's so tribal and not worth your time, give it back, please.
Yes.
I'm really just saying for a friend. I'm just asking for a friend. If you guys don't really like it, give it back. We'll take it. We won't charge you guys the fee for showing it for the last how many years. We won't charge you for it. We'll gladly take it back. We'll just call it quits. So, and I think that's when we start putting the value, and again, going back to how our parents' generation and before them did not value the work that our own work. So I think, again, it's the education has to be within the schools and the system, but there also needs to be an internal education within us. I think the onus now is on us. As an artist, what do you think?
No, definitely. And I mean, part of our aims as a collective is to work with institutions, work with schools to start kind of just showing that we are here, we exist, and showing the younger generation that, you know, there are artists that look like you, that are creating work, and that art is a very viable kind of career, and also just kind of working with the community as well, trying to do projects within the community, because like you say, it's about changing that mindset outside of the education system as well. And then we also want to work with artists across the diaspora in Africa and in the Caribbean as well. And we actually just came back from doing our first CrossCultural Exchange project in Ghana this August, and that was basically working with 3 Ghanaian artists and 3 artists from the BBFA coming together, sitting and talking and learning from each other about, you know, the issues that we face as artists in the diaspora and what female artists in Ghana face, because, you know, there will be similarities but there will be huge differences as well. And then through that we came together and did a collaborative exhibition, which went fantastically well, and it just showed that there is a real need for this. I think it's not since the 80s, I think, was when artists were kind of moving around a lot and you know, working with artists globally and I think it's so important because, one, it's a great way to develop and challenge you as an artist and develop your practice. But I think it's also really important to open up those conversations, because in that way, I'm hoping that we can really affect change, because the more we come together and work, the stronger our voices. And so if we are tackling these issues of us being black women and the different challenges we face in different areas of the world, if we come together, we're able to really affect change by having that strong voice and having a strong voice globally. So I think that's really important.
I like that. And I really like the idea that we start looking at this global pattern, not just what's happening here in the States, but a global thing wherever we are in the diaspora, because people think whenever we say people of color, we think immediately the UK, the US. Yeah. And there's also a lot of art going on in Europe within that as well. So my next question for you is, we keep talking about the collective, and you are a collective of how many?
6.
Who are part of the collective?
So, now I love these ladies so much. We are such a sisterhood, and I'm just like, when you start something and you feel like, you're on the right path because the right things come your way. So we have Adelaide Damois, who is an amazing figurative painter, and actually she has kind of moved and grown, and she's now working on body printing, and it is just mind-blowing. Her work is so stunning. Please go and check out her website, AdelaideDamoisArts.com, I believe. And we have a sculptor, Arlene Wandera, who again is just as amazing. So Arlene, she actually has had a fantastic year. Before, she was one of the artists alongside Adelaide who came out to Ghana with me to do our project. But just ahead of that, she'd just done a project, so she's in another collective called Duck and Rabbit, and they just delivered a project in
Duck and Rabbit,
yes. And they just delivered a project in South Africa. And just before that, she was in Venice, because she was also part of the Kenya Pavilion at the Venice Biennale. So yeah, she's big things.
She's holding her own. Okay.
She's holding her own. And we also have Cheryl Stapleton, who is a multimedia artist. So she works through film, photography and collage, and she's been working on collage for the most part for the kind of last few years, and her work is really beautiful, really interesting. And I don't know if people know of the works of people like Romer Bearden, who is an African-American artist. If you don't know about Romer, please do go. And his work is actually at Soul of a Nation, which is the biggest show that's been running at Tate Modern and covering arts in America, so within the African American community, kind of around the age of Black Power. And it's just, for any Black person, it's just really important that you go and see the show, and it finishes this weekend, I believe, so please do go out and see if you haven't. And then we also have Colleen De Souza, who is like just immense. She's a street artist, and her work is just immense. So she's been working through a Golden series at the moment, and she's just recently finished a piece that's kind of a homage to the 90s era hip hop. So you've got people like Salt and Pepper, you've got LL Cool J, you've got KRS-One, who actually, I don't know if he came into town especially for this, because I haven't had a chance to catch up with her, but he was actually in the UK recently and went down to see the work, because he'd heard about it back in the US and kind of sent her a video to say thank you, and then he came down to see the work. So yeah, Colleen De Souza also just like doing amazing things. And myself, obviously. And then another beautiful painter called Aisha Faisal. And her work it's stunning. So it's very kind of spiritual, looking at energy and how we are reflected through that. So she does these beautiful, they're not self-portraits, but everyone always says they kind of look like her a bit, these images of women. And her sense of colour is just stunning. So each piece you see, you just have this kind of kinetic reaction to, because the work is just, it talks to you on a on a spiritual level, because it is all about that energy and it's reflected in the colours that she uses. So it's just beautiful. So yeah, I mean, you know, obviously I'm always going to be biased because, you know, they're my girls, but they are all just in their own right fantastic artists and creating really beautiful work that needs to be seen.
Oh, you sound like you are totally in awe of each and every one of these women.
Definitely.
How can we find out more about the Black British Female Artists Collective?
So you can find us online. So our site is bbfablog.wordpress.com. Also, obviously, on Instagram as BBFA Collective and Twitter BBFA Collective as well. And yeah, we will be working on some more projects, looking at doing a lot of exciting things next year. So we're kind of, you know, got a bit of downtime now to plan everything. But yeah, watch out for us because this is only the beginning.
Awesome. And are you guys going to have an exhibition? Are you going to show your work here?
Yes, definitely.
When?
So it's all happening next year. So we're actually working on our first group show, and it's around a central theme. And so we are working towards that for kind of early to mid of next year, and then also working towards another CrossCultural Exchange, which will hopefully include all 6 of us working with 6 artists. So yeah, and then a few other projects because we've done talks and things like that as well, but we're just trying to kind of pace ourselves out because it's been quite full on this year. So trying to plan out the year strategically, but the 2 main things will be our first group show and then our next cross-cultural exchange.
Well, you have to keep us informed so we can share with our platform and our people who listen in, and also we can share it to across, you know, our networks, because I think that the onus is on us to share and inform and let people know that this kind of work is going on, because like I said, we end up not knowing till it's too late.
No, thank you. No, I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I mean, it's funny because you know, I met Adelaide a very long time ago, and I interviewed her, and it's funny how things come around in a circle.
Yeah.
And to know that her work has moved on, because her work was amazing then.
Yes.
So I can only imagine the growth of her work.
Beautiful. It's really, I'm so excited for her because I feel like she is going to blow up. She's just amazing and just such a beautiful soul as well, which is lovely.
So we should remind her that, you know, we got that interview in way back when, before she became famous. Adelaide, we know you're watching this live Twitter, so just in case, you know, you do blow up. No, not if. When you do blow up, remember that, you know, we interviewed you way back when. We're just saying.
I love it.
You know, so even thinking about your work and how far you've come, how has your work evolved? What's been the changes in your work?
I think for me, it's weird because I have 2 different sides to my work, I guess. So I have these kind of really expressive floral paintings, and then I have the more kind of textural works like that piece with the wire, and those below. And so, but I really enjoy working in both formats.
Okay. So hold on one second. Let me try and see if I can get people to see.
Okay.
Excuse the mess, people. So that piece I've seen on your website. What is that piece?
So that's part of the Wings series. So again, it's looking at butterfly wings, looking at nature, and it's again that idea of freedom and of flight. And I always like to kind of drill down and kind of do real close-ups of the things that I do studies of. And it's really funny because it gets to a point where you can't actually tell that that is a butterfly wing because it's quite abstracted. And I just love playing with texture. So those were painted on tissue paper, and so that's why it's got that kind of really crinkled effect to it.
You painted on tissue paper?
On tissue paper, yeah.
Oh my God, that is incredible.
And so, yeah, I think that's the one thing I love about being a textile artist is that you just get to play and manipulate materials. So at the moment I'm working on a new collection of works. I'm working towards a solo show, and it's investigating hosiery, so tights. Because I was interested in the fact that it's only very recently that we've seen this growth of brands that create nudes for women of colour. And so before that, standardly, every black woman you saw would be wearing black tights in the winter because those chocolate tights are just not the one.
No.
But I was just really interested in investigating that because, you know, again, in a very simple product, very simple commodity, you know, women of colour were completely invisible. And the nude colour was, you know, a nude for a white woman. So
we don't even think that's nude for white women because it's like a weird salmon-y
It's a very
colour.
weird colour. Yeah, exactly. And so I started researching into that, and it was really kind of appalling to find that, you know, tights were invented a century ago, and it's only now that we're seeing these brands that cater to us. And so throughout this whole time, we've just been invisible, and you never think about it, but all of these things have, you know, an emotional effect on us, but we know, we just carry on, you know, we buy our black tights and we keep it moving. But I think it's something that needs to be addressed.
Oh, yeah.
And I was looking at advertising, specifically in the 20s, because that was a point when, you know, the sexualization of women became, you know, kind of the norm. And again, in that space, in advertising, we weren't present whatsoever, and we haven't been present up until now. But, you know, there were instances where we were present, but in a very derogatory sense. So there was a brand called Onyx Hosiery.
Never heard of it.
Well, yeah, this was way back in the 20s, but the images were of little black children, and it was because it was black tights, and so it was like, this is the blackest black you can find. And it's just very disturbing. It's very, very disturbing. And then you've got brands that had, you know, each pair of tights has a colour name. So there was one called Darky, and it had a picture, a little caricature of a black cotton picker with a banjo. And so all of these are really problematic. And obviously at that time, it was the norm for, you know, for it to just be so brazenly blatant, although you say that. And
then you have Dub.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, we weren't supposed to call names. We understand you apologize for missing your mark. Not sure what that mark was, but we'll continue.
Yeah. And actually just recently, I don't know if you saw, Fuse ODG had posted a picture, I think it was just yesterday, of an ad in Ghana. A kind of huge banner ad in
Nivea.
Ghana. Yes.
Yeah, Nivea, we see you. We see you too.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, you know, you go onto their, and I think a lot of people are saying this in the comments, their UK and US sites, and, you know, they're promoting diversity and, you know, for all. And then, you know,
on the continent
you go home. Exactly.
We can help you get a little lighter.
Yeah. My kind of current work is investigating all these things, and so again I am playing with materials, so I'm actually using the tights to create my work. So I'm cutting them up and creating yarn and knitting with them and stitching with them, printing on them, and just playing. So that's what I mean when I say I love the freedom that it gives me.
You know what? So that explained the tights in the corner.
Yes.
I didn't want to say anything when I came in. I'm like, okay, maybe she has a little collection going. I didn't want to be rude and ask. I was like, you know what? I'm in your studio space, so I shouldn't ask too many questions.
She's like, she's a creative. She's just weird.
Exactly. I was like, I won't ask these things. But now that you've clarified, you know, I think, you know, we talk about this, and it's funny how we are supposed to be at a time when we should be post these discussions.
Exactly.
But it seems like now more than ever, we need to have these discussions. Yeah. We need to have these discussions that say, we want to be seen in a particular light, and we will no longer be accepted. And I'm talking very emphatically about Black women, how we are shown, how we are depicted in either print or not depicted in print, you know, any form of media. And what I find now disturbing is the other end is now we're being depicted, again, is going to that other extreme of the very sexual other. Yes. And it's like, so it's either we're very sexual or we are very, the big mammy type.
Mammy character.
Type situation. And it's like, no middle ground?
Yeah.
And then when they do middle ground, then you have shows, I won't mention the soap operas here, but again, it's a very particular light. And I think, as an artist, and I know this is slightly out of your realm, but what's going on with the depiction, and how can we, on an everyday level, start correcting that?
Well, I think it goes back to what I was saying before. there are artists out there creating work that shows us just as we are, you know. And I've mentioned artists before, Sonia Boyce. I think I even I said the wrong last name, Claudette Johnson rather than Thompson, who did these beautiful portraits of black women just being, and in poses where it's like, I'm here and I'm owning myself. But you don't see these. They're in collections where they're just kind of stored and gathering dust. They're not out in museums for us to go out and see ourselves reflected. And I mean, obviously I talk about the arts because that is, you know, my industry, and I think it's really important, and that's another reason why I wanted to start BBFA, because I thought it was really important for us to be out there and be seen. And so the more that we can create work and we can create our own platforms to show our work and get out into the community so that they see us and see us representing ourselves, then the more we can start to try and make those changes. Because until we own our own voice, that is never going to change. Because in Western society, they will continue to feed those stereotypes because that's what's comfortable for them. That's not what's comfortable for us. And so we need to make those changes. No one else is going to do that for us.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. And this is what I say about storytelling. Until we tell our own stories over our own platforms, until we take ownerships on the stories we tell, our stories will always be limited and casted in a certain light, and the onus becomes on us. Yeah. And which is why I started the show.
Fantastic.
So that's why I started the show. And then, when you look at your work, if you look at how far you've come and where you are right now, what would you tell yourself at 18, starting out fresh and innocent? What advice would you give her?
I think I would say just enjoy the journey. I think I put a lot of pressure on myself. I still do. And, you know, I'm not going to stereotype all African families, but, you know, there's this thing where, you know, your parents want you to do well. And so you're always like striving. I'm always like, okay, by this age I should have done this, and by this age I should have done that. And I think it was just a case of slow down and enjoy the journey. I've got to a place now where I realise that everything that happened for a reason and prepared me for where I am right now. And so it's just about enjoying it and not putting too much pressure on yourself. And with anything, it takes time. So you just have to be patient, because especially, you know, you get to a certain age, you start reading certain books. So for instance, like The Tipping Point, and it says you need to put in 10,000 hours to, you know, really be successful in whatever it is you want to do. And I think especially now, we're in a society where everyone wants, you know, fame and fortune now, like
now.
this.
They want it yesterday.
They want it yesterday, exactly. And it's like, you know, putting in the 10,000 hours, not only does it mean that you are actually really dedicated, because only someone that's dedicated is going to put in that time, but it means that you've then become an expert in your field because you've put in all of that time and you've learned from your mistakes. And that's the other thing, we all make mistakes, and it's fine to make mistakes, so it's just about learning from it. So yeah, I think for my 18-year-old self, it would be enjoy the journey, be patient, and yeah, just enjoy being that young.
It's okay. It's all right. It's okay. All right. But, you know, the fun part about this, and you've done amazing work, and you have this amazing collective of women. How do you take care of you? How do you take care? What are your self-care practices? How do you take care of the artists within?
That's a really great question, actually. So I am very much about mindfulness. I think it's so important. And so I actually have to confess that at the moment I've been rushing around so much that I haven't actually made that time for self-care, which is bad, I know, but I'm going to just be open and honest. But when I do, I mean, I love running, so I go for a run. I've got a beautiful country park right by where I live, so I go for a run, and that's really helpful to clear my head. I love just dancing to music, so I will just put music on and just dance around the room. That's my idea of self-care. Like, I just put some MJ on and just shock out. For me, I think self-care is just about getting myself in that happy place, and so doing things like that is what gets me there. And then I actually do. I haven't for ages, but I have a massage therapist that I go to that does acupuncture and massage for me, and I used to go kind of quite regularly, like every month. I haven't for ages now, but that's, you know, it's a really nice treatment. It's a really nice way to centre myself, and then meditate, which again I haven't done in a long time, but you know, I think it's really important to just take that time to try and just be still and have the mind be still, because we are just constantly thinking, overthinking, and I mean, mental health has been a really huge topic, especially in our community quite recently, and I think it is because we just don't take that time. You need to realise that the brain is a muscle like any other thing in your body, and you need to exercise it and look after it. And so meditation, just even if you don't really understand what meditation is, just taking some time to just be in a quiet space and just listen to your breathing and just breathe in and out very deeply. It's just so healing. It really makes such a difference. So yeah, those are some of the things that I do to look after the one.
Well, it seems to be working. And you know, so I love that. And there seems to be a reoccurring pattern, because I've interviewed quite a few amazing women in the last few months, and they all say, I do have these practices, but I do have these practices, but yeah. And I'm just as guilty. You know, and we get to a point where we're not, you know, and I think it's very important. And like you said, the mental health and taking ownership of our body, our health, it's you know, it's on us.
It's really important, yeah.
So, you know, I cannot stress that enough. And if you are just joining us, people, it's 9 o'clock. Where have you been?
Charlie, you are late.
You're very late. But if you're just joining us, I've had the pleasure of taking the show on the road tonight, and we are at the studio of a multi-textural artist who is just all-round shades of amazing. She works in various mediums and works with her incredible collective of 6. And Enam, thank you for having us in your space.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I am looking forward to getting to interview the collective, because I think it'll be really awesome.
That would be amazing
to have you all in the same room. And on top of that, when we think about everything that you're doing, everything that you've accomplished, I have one more question for you. You know, Columbo style. One more question. How do you bounce back from failure? How do you bounce back when you've experienced failure?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, I think it's just one of those corny things where it's just time. There have been times where I've been really, really low. You know, I've been made redundant a couple of times when I was working in the States, and you know, at that point you think your world has completely ended and crumbled, and what are you going to do? And it is just time. And I think it's really important to just feel those feelings, feel those emotions. You know, if you're hurt, you're angry, just those emotions need to flow through you, and then you get to a point where you'll start to be able to be objective and figure out what your next step is. But I'm definitely one for just feeling those emotions rather than bottling them up, because then that just makes it worse. So yeah, I would think the main thing is just, you know, letting yourself ride through whatever emotions you're going through and get to a point where you can then be objective, and just realise that it will take time, but don't give up. You know, especially as an artist, you're going to get no's, like how many times, over and over and over. You just have to keep going. If it's something that you really believe in, if you're truly passionate about it, you just keep going, and eventually those doors will open. And also, don't be afraid to ask for help. You know, if you get to a point where you just think, I don't know what to do, ask for help. You know, there will be people that will be like, don't have time, whatever, but at least you're putting yourself out there, you're asking the question, and someone will say, you know what, you know, this is what worked for me, give it a try. Or they'll put you in touch with someone else. You know, just never be afraid to ask for help and ask questions if you don't know.
Awesome, thank you. And, you know, we've come to the point of the show where I ask everybody, what is your so loud moment of the week? And I know the week is just we're just still in that mix of it. What's your so loud moment?
My so loud moment. So is this where I get to shout out my friends?
Your people.
My peoples. Okay, so I have to, and definitely this week I have to shout out Miss Lisa Anderson. So Lisa Anderson is another lady in the arts that is doing big things. So she in 2015 created the online platform Black British Art, which exists solely to highlight and document art by Black British artists, basically. And alongside that, she's a curator and a consultant. So she's curated 2 shows for a private law firm. She's also a fantastic writer. So she also works within fundraising. And she's just an all-round, just amazing being. And I'm really fortunate to work very closely with her because obviously what BBFA and what BBA are doing are quite similar. But we also are both on this fantastic program set up by the International Curators Forum called Beyond the Frame. And it's actually tackling one of the things that we were talking about. So it's working with art professionals in the BAME community, so the Black, Asian, minority ethnic community, to kind of address the lack of diversity that is in, the kind of professional arts realm. And so it's working with 10 emerging curators. And so both Lisa and I are on that program, so we've been working very closely because of that also. And she is someone that is just so supportive, always champions me. She's one of those people that I call when I'm feeling low and I need someone to just be like, listen, missus, check yourself. This is all the good things that you have going on in your life, and this is what you can do to rectify the things that aren't going so well. And she's just like a tour de force, and you just need to definitely watch out for her. And just the fact that she saw a huge gap in the market, and she realised that where is the space that's just profiling all these fantastic artists from yesteryear, that from now, that are working and creating amazing work within the Black community. So please do go out and check her website, blackbritishart.com. She's also on Instagram, and just watch out for the amazing work that she'll be doing.
Awesome. So where can people find your work?
So you can find me online. So my website is enamgdesigns.com, and on social media, so on Instagram as enamgd and on Twitter as enamgdesigns.
Awesome. And I've been asked to ask you a question. How can we get hold of your artwork? I had someone look at the website and was asking about certain pieces of work.
Okay.
How much are they? Where can we buy them?
Okay, so prices range, so depending on what you're interested in. But yeah, just drop me an email. So my email is enam@enamgdesigns.com.
Awesome. Guys, you've heard it here. The wonderful, amazing Enam G, as she puts it, for her work. And let me try this again because I really want to get this in her name right. And for me, it's important. So Enam Gbewonyo. Yes. I think it's a W that throws me in the name. Because I'm used to silent letters, and I'm thinking, is that silent? Is that not? But Enam Gbewonyo.
Yeah.
And I can't thank you enough for inviting us out for our first on the road show without suitcase. And yeah, the studio comes in a suitcase.
I was very impressed. Very impressed with the setup.
I can't thank you enough. And I'm looking out for the work that you individually are doing, your individual women in the collective, and you all as a collective. And I'm looking forward to seeing your work, going to see your work, sharing your work, and actually just generally talking about your work some more. And I'm looking forward to what 2018 will bring for you guys.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So to everyone listening live on Spreaker.com, thank you so much. For those of you on Twitter, hey! This has been fun. It's a fun experiment. Don't we just love technology when it all comes together?
When it works, yes.
And, catch us on the replay. You know where you can find us on iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, and also on our website, and now on Amazon Alexa. So we are everywhere. You can find us. Please listen, like the show, go on iTunes, give us a like, and stop by and have a word with us. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram. So go out, reach out and touch us. Not literally. Don't. That would be just too weird. But send us a message, and we'll love to hear back from all of you. Thank you for listening, and it's a wrap.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What's going on? If you're enjoying today's show, don't forget to check out our website at www.shineoutloud.tv. And we'd definitely appreciate it if you subscribe to the show and leave us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes too. Thank you.